Hey guys, welcome aboard to Snoozy Voyager. Tonight we're drifting into a part of history that's equal parts perfume and poor decisions. The life of a Wild West brothel worker. Not the glamorous movie version with perfect curls and piano music that somehow never stops. I mean the real version, dusty, loud, unpredictable, and filled with more awkward small talk than a family reunion where nobody agrees on politics. So before you get too comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy this kind of slightly questionable historical bedtime storytelling. And if you feel like it, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. There's always someone out there trying to fall asleep while learning about deeply inconvenient parts of history. And honestly, I respect that. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft, comforting hum, and get yourself settled in. Tuck your feet in, because tonight, the floorboards creak, and not in a peaceful, cozy way. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it actually felt like to work in a Wild West brothel? Not just the obvious parts, but the daily life. Like, how do you even end up there? Was it a choice? A last resort, or a well? This escalated quickly kind of situation. What did a normal day look like? Did normal even exist? What did you eat? Where did you sleep? How did you deal with customers who thought bathing was optional but confidence was not? And perhaps most importantly, how did you keep your sanity in a place where privacy is basically a myth and the walls are thinner than your patience by noon? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1875. The town outside is loud, dusty, and smells faintly of horses, whiskey, and bad decisions. You're not at home, you're not comfortable, and someone is already knocking on your door. Good luck. You don't wake up one day as a brothel worker the way you wake up craving coffee or questioning your life choices after scrolling too long. No. Your journey here is more like a slow tumble downhill, the kind where you keep telling yourself you're still in control, right up until you're not. Maybe you came west chasing opportunity, or escaping something back east, debt, family, or a man who said trust me with the confidence of someone who absolutely should not be trusted. The frontier promised freedom, but what it delivered was complicated. Jobs are scarce, survival is not optional. And suddenly, the brothel, bright, busy, and always hiring, starts to look less like a scandal and more like a solution. At first you try other options. Of course you do. You take whatever work you can find. Laundry, maybe. Endless piles of shirts that somehow arrive dirtier than they should be. As if men in the Wild West are actively competing to see who can lose a fight with soap the fastest. Or you try cooking in a boarding house, where the ingredients are limited and the expectations are, somehow still high. There's always someone complaining, too salty, not salty enough. Back home, my mother, yes, well, your mother is not here. And neither is seasoning. You consider domestic service. Working in someone else's home. It sounds respectable, which is code for underpaid and exhausting. Long days, strict rules, and the constant feeling that you are one misplaced spoon away from being replaced. The frontier doesn't reward stability, it rewards speed, risk, and sometimes desperation. And then there's the reality you can't ignore, the imbalance. Towns full of men. Prospectors, cowboys, railroad workers, drifters, all of them with money in their pockets and loneliness trailing behind them like a shadow. You begin to notice the other women, the ones dressed a little brighter, laughing a little louder, walking with a kind of confidence that seems almost rehearsed. At first you judge them, quietly, from a distance, because that's what you've been taught to do. That this is not the path, that this is what happens when things go wrong. And then, slowly, your perspective shifts. Because those women are eating well, They have a place to sleep that isn't shared with 6 strangers and a questionable mattress. They are not scrubbing floors until their hands ache or hoping someone pays them at the end of the week. They are working, yes, but they are surviving. And on the frontier, survival has a way of rewriting your definitions. The decision when it comes isn't dramatic. There's no thunderclap, no moment where you stand on a hill and declare your fate to the wind. It's quieter than that. A conversation, an introduction, someone saying you could do well here, and you hesitate, because you know what this means. You know how people talk, you know the reputation, the whispers, the judgments, the way society draws neat little lines between acceptable and not to be mentioned in polite company. But polite company isn't paying your bills, or so you weigh your options. Not in grand moral terms, but in practical ones. Food, shelter, safety, independence, or at least something close to it. And when you finally say yes, it doesn't feel like a fall. It feels like a step. A step into something uncertain, complicated, and undeniably real. You gather what little you have, which, let's be honest, is not much. A small bag, maybe, a few personal items, the kind of possessions that tell a story, even if that story is currently taking a very unexpected turn. The walk to the brothel is shorter than you expected, or maybe it just feels that way because your mind is racing. You notice everything. The dust under your feet, the sounds of the town, horses, voices, the distant clink of glasses. Life going on as if this moment isn't quietly changing everything for you. And when you arrive, you pause, just for a second, because you can still turn back. You can still pretend you never came here. Go back to the uncertainty, the exhaustion, the constant question of what next. But then the door opens, and someone inside notices you, and just like that, the moment passes. There's no dramatic music, no voice announcing your destiny, just a step forward, and the understanding that whatever comes next, this is where your new life begins, which is both exciting and slightly terrifying, but mostly unavoidable. The building greets you like it's trying very hard to convince you of something, not aggressively, more like a polite but persistent suggestion. The curtains are heavy, rich in colour, the kind that say luxury if you don't look too closely at the seams. The windows glow with warm light, and from the outside, it almost feels inviting. Almost. Then you step inside, and reality gently taps you on the shoulder. The air is thick, not unpleasant exactly, but layered. Perfume sits on top, sweet and deliberate, like someone tried to bottle elegance and may have gone slightly overboard. Underneath that, there's tobacco smoke curling lazily through the room, and beneath that, whiskey, spilled, splashed, and very much present. And somewhere, faint but undeniable, the smell of too many people in one place for too long. It's not overwhelming, but it is honest. The lighting is soft, designed to flatter everyone equally, which is impressive considering the circumstances. Lamps glow in corners, casting shadows that blur edges and smooth imperfections. It's the kind of lighting that says, let's not focus too much on the details. You hear music, a piano, and slightly out of tune but determined. Someone is playing with enthusiasm, if not precision. The melody drifts through the room, filling spaces that might otherwise feel too quiet. Voices overlap, laughter, conversation, the occasional raised tone that suggests someone has had just enough whiskey to believe they are now a philosopher. You stand there for a moment, taking it all in. This is not the scandalous chaos you imagined. It's structured, busy, yes, loud, certainly, but there's a rhythm to it, a flow. People move with purpose. Workers glide between tables, conversations rise and fall like waves, and everything feels just organised enough to avoid tipping into complete disorder. You notice the other women. They notice you too. It's subtle. A glance here, a raised eyebrow there. Not unkind, but curious. You're new, And in a place like this, new is always noticed. Their dresses are brighter than anything you've worn before, colours that catch the eye, fabrics that move with intention. It's not just fashion, it's presentation. Every detail chosen to stand out, to draw attention without asking for it. They carry themselves differently, confident, or at least convincingly so. You realise quickly that confidence here is part of the job. Whether it's real or carefully constructed doesn't matter nearly as much as how well it's performed. And then the Madame appears. Not dramatically. She doesn't sweep in or announce herself. She simply arrives, as if she's always been there and you're only just now catching up. Her gaze finds you immediately. There's no hesitation, no uncertainty. She looks at you the way someone looks at a ledger, assessing, calculating, understanding value at a glance. It's not unkind, but it is precise. She approaches, and you suddenly become very aware of yourself, your posture, your clothes, the way you're standing, as if there's a correct way to exist in this moment, and you're not entirely sure what it is. She speaks, calmly, clearly. No wasted words. There's a conversation, though it feels less like small talk and more like an evaluation. Questions are asked, simple ones, but each with weight behind it. Your name, your situation, what you're looking for, though both of you already know the answer. You answer carefully. Because something about her suggests that honesty is not just preferred, it's expected. Around you, the house continues its rhythm. Nothing stops for this moment. No one pauses to watch. Life here moves forward, constantly, as if it has no time for hesitation. And that's when it settles in. This is a business, not a scandal, not a secret, a business. Structured, efficient, and very much aware of its place in the world. The madam finishes speaking and there's a brief pause, not awkward, just final. You get the sense that a decision has been made, maybe by her, maybe by you, maybe by both of you at the same time. And then she nods, a small gesture, but it carries weight. Because with that single nod, you're no longer just standing in the doorway. You're part of this place now. The music continues. The laughter rises again. Somewhere, a glass clinks against another, and you realise, with a strange mix of calm and disbelief, this is your world now. Not forever, but for now. And for the first time since you arrived. You take a step forward without hesitation. Let's talk about Madam, because she's not just your boss, she's your landlord, your accountant, your rulebook, and sometimes your only line of defense between you and complete chaos. She runs this place like a business, because that's exactly what it is. She decides your rates, your schedule, and occasionally your hairstyle. She might be kind, or she might be terrifyingly efficient, like someone who could smile while evicting your soul. Either way, you quickly learn that staying on her good side is less of a suggestion and more of a survival strategy. You begin to notice how she moves through the house, not hurried, not slow, just certain. While everything around her hums with noise, piano keys slightly missing their mark, laughter rising too loudly, boots thudding across the floor, she exists in a different rhythm. She doesn't need to raise her voice. She doesn't need to repeat herself. When she speaks, people listen, the way you listen, when someone clearly knows exactly what they're doing, and you suspect they've already thought 3 steps ahead of you. She keeps track of everything. And you mean everything. Who worked last night, who didn't, who earned well, who didn't, and who is starting to test the limits of her patience. She knows which customers cause trouble, which ones spend generously, and which ones need to be gently encouraged to leave before they become a story no one wants to tell twice. You might assume this is just about control. It's not. It's about balance. Because without her, this place doesn't function. it collapses into arguments, unpaid debts, broken furniture, fissy, and the kind of chaos that attracts attention from exactly the people you don't want noticing you. At some point she calls you aside. It's not dramatic. No one gasps, no music stops, but you feel it. That quiet shift where suddenly you are the focus. She explains things, not everything at once, because that would be overwhelming, and also because she knows you'll learn faster by doing than by listening. But enough. The rules, the expectations, the way money works, which, as you quickly realise, is not quite as straightforward as you earn it, you keep it. There are percentages, always percentages, a portion for the house, for your room, your meals, your clothing, your existence, essentially. It's explained calmly, as if this is the most natural arrangement in the world, and in this world, it is. You nod, because arguing would be both unhelpful and deeply unwise. Then there are the unspoken rules, the ones she doesn't list but you understand anyway. Don't cause trouble, don't attract the wrong kind of attention, and most importantly, don't make her regret bringing you here. You start to notice something else too. She watches, not constantly, not in an obvious way, but enough. From across the room, from the edge of a conversation, from behind a ledger or a glass she may or may not be drinking from. She sees how you handle yourself, how you speak, how you carry the weight of this new life. And sometimes, unexpectedly, she steps in. A difficult customer, getting a little too loud, a little too comfortable. You feel the tension rising, that quiet sense that things might shift in a direction you don't want to follow. And then she's there. Calm, firm, unmistakable, the situation resolves quickly because she knows how to manage people the way a skilled rider manages a restless horse, with just enough control to keep things moving without causing a scene. It's in these moments you realise something important. She is not just running a business, she is maintaining order in a place that could very easily fall apart. Later you hear stories, fragments really, how she started, how she built this place, the deals she made, the risks she took. Some of it sounds impressive, some of it sounds slightly terrifying. All of it suggests that she has survived more than most and learned from every single moment. You begin to understand her in layers. The businesswoman, the protector, the person who has seen enough to know that kindness and toughness are not opposites. They are tools, or used when necessary. And where do you fit into all this? Somewhere between employee and investment. You're part of the system now, a piece of the larger structure she's built. And if you do well, she does well. Which means, in a strange way, she wants you to succeed, not out of sentiment, but out of practicality. And honestly, at this point, you'll take that. Because in a world where very little is guaranteed, having someone who understands how to keep things running is a kind of security, even if it comes with rules and percentages, and the quiet understanding that this place may feel like a home, but it is always, first and foremost, a business. You're shown to your room, which is technically yours, in the same way a borrowed umbrella is yours during a storm. Small, functional, and just thin enough that you can hear everything happening on either side. The bed creaks like it has stories to tell, and not one of them is restful. There's a mirror, because appearances matter here, and a wash basin that suggests cleanliness, even if reality disagrees. You realise quickly that privacy is more of a concept than a guarantee. The door closes behind you, and for a brief, almost luxurious moment. It's quiet, not silent. This house doesn't really do silence, but quieter. The sounds from the hallway soften into a distant hum. Voices blur into background noise. The piano becomes less of a performance and more of a suggestion. You stand there, taking it in. This is your space. or at least the closest version of space you're going to get. The bed sits against the wall, slightly uneven, as if it has given up on the idea of perfection. You press a hand down on the mattress. It responds with a faint complaint. Not terrible, but not exactly inviting either. You get the sense that this bed has supported many things over time, sleep being only one of them. You glance at the mirror. It's not large, but it's positioned carefully, catching the light just right. You step closer, studying your reflection. There's something different about how you look here. Maybe it's the lighting. Maybe it's the awareness that this reflection isn't just for you anymore, it's part of the job. You adjust your posture slightly, then immediately feel ridiculous for doing so, but you keep doing it anyway. The wash basin sits nearby, a small attempt at cleanliness in a place where time and resources don't always cooperate. A pitcher of water, a cloth, yes, the basic tools of staying presentable. You notice the limitations right away. This is not a long, relaxing bath. This is efficiency. Quick, practical, necessary. You test the water. Cool. Of course it is. You make a mental note. Warmth here is something you'll have to create, not expect. Then there are the walls. Thin. Remarkably thin. At first, it's just faint sounds. A laugh from the next room. Footsteps in the hallway. A door opening, closing. Normal, manageable. Then you realise that's not the full range. Because as time passes, the house becomes louder, busier, more alive. And the walls, they do absolutely nothing to stop that. You hear conversations you didn't intend to hear. Laughter that carries a little too clearly. The occasional argument that rises and falls like a poorly timed performance. You learn very quickly that privacy here is not about silence, it's about selective attention. You start practicing it. Ignoring what you can, tuning out what you must. It's a skill, a necessary one. You sit on the edge of the bed and it creaks again, as if acknowledging your presence. This is where you'll sleep, eventually, between everything else. You look around the room again, noticing small details. A hook for your clothes, a chair that may or may not be stable, the faint marks on the floor, evidence of time and use. It's not much, but it's something. And in a place like this, something matters. You begin to unpack, if you can call it that. A few belongings placed carefully as if arranging them will somehow make the room feel more yours. A small ritual of control in an environment that doesn't offer much of it. It helps, a little. Then there's a knock on the wall. Not your door, the wall, a quick light tap. You pause, then instinctively you tap back. There's a pause, then another tap. You don't know who it is. You don't know why it feels reassuring. But it does. Because suddenly, this room doesn't feel entirely isolated. It feels connected to the rest of the house, to the other women, to the strange shared experience you're all navigating together. You lie back on the bed, testing it properly this time. It sways slightly. You stare up at the ceiling. And for the first time since you arrived, you allow yourself a moment. Not to think too far ahead. Not to question every choice. Just to exist. In this small, imperfect space that is now yours. Or at least, yours enough. Which for now is going to have to be enough. Morning arrives whether you're ready or not. And you're almost never ready. There's no peaceful alarm clock, just the distant sound of boots, voices, and someone laughing too loudly. You wash up with water that may or may not be warm, and prepare yourself for the day ahead. There's no slow morning here, no scrolling your phone while pretending to be productive. Just you, a mirror, and the realization that today will require energy you're not entirely sure you have. You wake up not because you're rested, but because the world around you has decided it's time. At first it's subtle, a shift in the noise, the kind of background sound that seeps into your dreams and gently pushes you back toward reality. Footsteps in the hallway, a door opening, someone speaking in a voice that suggests they have been awake longer than you have and are not particularly concerned about your sleep. Then something louder, a laugh, too sharp, too sudden, and just like that you're awake. You lie there for a moment, eyes closed, negotiating. Maybe if you stay very still. No. The bed creaks when you breathe. The hallway continues. The day has started, whether you agree with it or not. You open your eyes. The light filtering through the window is soft but not gentle. It reveals rather than comforts. The room looks exactly the same as it did last night, which is somehow both reassuring and disappointing. You sit up slowly. Your body reminds you that yesterday happened. In detail. You stretch, cautiously, as if testing whether your limbs are still fully operational. They are, but they have opinions about it. The floor is cool under your feet. You stand, and for a brief moment everything feels slightly unbalanced, not dramatically, and just enough to remind you that rest here is not quite the same as rest elsewhere. You move to the wash basin. The water is waiting, cool, as expected. You splash some onto your face, and the shock of it does more to wake you up than any coffee ever could. It's not pleasant, but it is effective. You take a cloth, wiping away the remnants of sleep, of yesterday, of whatever you can manage. This is your version of a reset. Quick, practical, necessary. You glance at yourself in the mirror. There's a pause. Because this is the moment where you assess. How do you look, more importantly? How do you look to others? You adjust your hair, smooth it down, try again. Tilt your head slightly, as if a different angle might solve everything. It doesn't, but it helps enough. You straighten your posture. There's something about standing a little taller that changes how you feel, even if only slightly. You hold on to that. Outside, the house is waking up fully now. Voices are clearer, movement more constant. Someone is already talking about something you don't fully catch, but the tone suggests it's either very important or not important at all. There is rarely an in-between. You dress. Not quickly, but efficiently. There's a rhythm to it already. Familiar, even though it's still new. Each movement has a purpose. Each choice matters just enough to be worth the effort. You take a breath. In, out, preparing. Not for anything specific, just for the day. Because here, the day doesn't wait for you to be ready. It simply begins, and you follow, whether you feel like it or not, which, most mornings, you don't, but you do it anyway. Because that's the routine. And routines, even imperfect ones, have a way of carrying you forward. Your outfit isn't just clothing, it's marketing. Bright colours, lace, ribbons, anything that catches the eye and says, yes, I am worth your limited supply of coins. But it's also practical. You learn quickly what works, what doesn't, and what survives a long day without falling apart, emotionally or structurally. It's like dressing for a very specific kind of job interview, one that never really ends. You stand in front of the mirror again, and this time it's less about recognizing yourself and more about constructing a version of yourself that fits the room outside. Because here, presentation is everything. You reach for a dress, something brighter than what you would have worn before all this. The fabric feels different, slightly heavier, ease slightly louder, as if it wants to be noticed just as much as you do. You slip into it carefully, adjusting the fit, smoothing out the creases that seem to appear out of nowhere, like they have their own agenda. There's an art to this, not overdressing, not underdressing, just enough to stand out without looking like you're trying too hard, even though you absolutely are. You add a ribbon, then reconsider, then adjust it again. It's a small detail, but details matter here in ways they never did before. A splash of colour near your face, a hint of contrast, something that catches the eye in a room full of movement and noise. You step back, Evaluate. Tilt your head slightly, as if the mirror might offer feedback if you look at it from the right angle. It doesn't. But you pretend it does anyway. Shoes come next. Practical, but not entirely. You need to move, to stand, to exist on your feet for longer than you prefer. But they also need to fit the look. It's a delicate balance between function and appearance, like trying to run a marathon in something that also says, yes, I have excellent taste. You take a few steps. The floor creaks in response as if offering commentary. You ignore it. Hair is another challenge. You attempt something simple, then adjust, then try again. Eventually you land on something that feels intentional, even if it took 3 attempts and a brief moment of staring into the void while questioning your coordination. You realise something important. Getting ready here isn't just about looking good. It's about creating a character, a version of yourself that can walk into that main room, meet strangers, and hold their attention long enough to make the entire process work. You practice a smile, not a full one, not exaggerated, just enough. You hold it for a second, then drop it, then try again. It feels strange at first, like rehearsing something that should come naturally, but the more you do it, the more it becomes automatic, a tool, like everything else. You adjust your posture again, stand a little straighter, shoulders back but not stiff, relaxed but not careless. There's a balance to this, and you are slowly, steadily finding it. Outside, the sounds of the house continue. Voices, movement, the steady hum of activity that never quite fades. You take one last look in the mirror, and for a moment you almost don't recognize yourself. Not completely, but enough. Because the person looking back at you is not the same one who arrived here. They are adapted, prepared, ready, or at least convincing enough to seem that way. You take a breath, then step toward the door, because the performance is about to begin, and like any good performance, it doesn't wait. Breakfast is simple, because luxury is reserved for paying customers. Bread, maybe some eggs if you're lucky, and coffee that tastes like it's been personally offended by your existence. You eat quickly because time is money, and also because someone is already arguing downstairs. It's not glamorous, but it's fuel, and you're going to need it. You follow the smell before you even realise you're doing it. Not because it's particularly inviting, but because it's there. A faint mix of bread, something vaguely egg-like, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead, but not necessarily in a pleasant way. You step into the dining area, if it can be called that. A table, a few chairs, the quiet chaos of people moving in and out, grabbing what they can before the day fully takes hold. There's no ceremony here, no leisurely sitting down with a warm drink and a moment of reflection. This is efficiency. You take a seat, if one is available. If not, you hover slightly, waiting for an opening, like a very polite game of musical chairs where the music never stops. Eventually you secure a spot. Victory. You reach for the bread. It's bread. Not terrible, not remarkable, just present. You take a bite, and it does exactly what it's supposed to do, exist as food. No more, no less. You chew thoughtfully as if giving it more attention might improve the experience. It doesn't. But again, you appreciate the effort. The eggs, if they're available, are a bonus. Slightly overcooked, slightly underseasoned, but undeniably eggs. You take them anyway, because options are limited and hunger is not. Then there's the coffee. You hesitate, just for a moment, because you know what's coming. But you take a sip anyway, and yes, it tastes like it was brewed with determination rather than skill. Strong, slightly bitter, with a personality that suggests it's not here to make friends. You swallow, pause, consider your life choices, then take another sip, because despite everything, it works. Around you, the room is alive with quiet conversations, fragments of stories, bits of laughter, the occasional complaint about something that happened yesterday or might happen later today. You listen, without meaning to. It's comforting in a strange way. This shared experience of starting the day not quite ready, but moving forward anyway. Someone across from you makes a comment about the coffee. You nod in agreement, because this is a universal truth. No explanation needed. You eat quickly, not rushed, but aware that time here is always moving, always shifting. There's no lingering, no second cup just because you feel like it. You finish, set your plate aside, and take one last sip of coffee. It's still not good, but it's done its job. You stand, adjusting slightly, preparing to move on to whatever comes next. Because breakfast here isn't about enjoyment, it's about preparation. Fueling up for a day that will require more from you than you're entirely sure you can give. But you'll give it anyway, because that's how this works. You show up, you do what needs to be done, and you try not to think too hard about the coffee, which, honestly, is a challenge. There's always a moment, right before your first customer of the day, where time slows down just enough for you to question every life decision that brought you here. Then the door opens and reality steps in, usually wearing boots and questionable confidence. Some are polite, some are awkward, and some clearly believe this is their moment to shine. You smile because that's part of the job, and the day officially begins. You stand near the edge of the room, not quite hidden, but not fully in the centre either, observing, waiting. There's a rhythm to how things unfold here, and you're starting to recognise it. Customers enter, pause, scan the room like they're choosing from a menu they don't fully understand. Conversations spark, deals are made, and the flow continues. And then, it's your turn. You don't always know exactly when it happens. Sometimes it's a glance that lingers just a second longer than usual. Sometimes it's a direct approach, confident and immediate. And sometimes it's hesitant, uncertain, like they're not entirely sure they should be here at all. This one falls somewhere in the middle. Boots, of course. There are always boots. He approaches with the kind of confidence that suggests he practiced this moment in his head, and possibly got it slightly wrong. You straighten, just slightly. Not obvious, just enough. He speaks, you listen, and just like that, you're in it. The conversation begins, and it's not what you expected. Not entirely. There's an awkwardness to it. A kind of careful dance where both of you are figuring out the steps in real time. He talks a bit too much, or maybe just enough. You nod, respond, guide the interaction gently, like steering a wagon that doesn't quite want to stay on the path. You realise quickly that this is part of the skill. Not just reacting, directing, subtly. You smile when it's appropriate, laugh when it helps, ask questions that keep things moving without making it feel like effort. It's a performance, but not a dishonest one, more like a curated version of reality. He relaxes gradually. The tension fades, replaced by something more manageable, and you feel it too, that shift from uncertainty to routine. Because despite everything, this is something people have done before, many times. You're just stepping into the role. Time moves strangely during this, faster and slower at the same time. Moments stretch, then snap back into place, and before you know it, it's over. Not dramatically, just done. He leaves with a nod, maybe a word or two, and you're left standing there, the space around you settling back into its usual rhythm. You take a breath, in, out, and then you realise something. You did it. Your first customer. No disasters, no dramatic missteps, no sudden urge to run out the door and reconsider your entire existence. Just a beginning. You adjust your posture again, almost automatically. Glance around the room. Everything continues. Nothing has stopped. Because here, There is no grand acknowledgement of milestones, no applause, just the quiet understanding that you're now part of the flow, and there will be another, and another, and another, which is both reassuring, and slightly overwhelming. But for now, you allow yourself a small moment. Not celebration, just recognition. Because the hardest part is often the first step, and you've taken it, which means the day is officially underway, and there's no turning back now. Not that you expected there to be, but still, it's good to know. A surprising amount of your job involves talking, listening to stories, nodding at the right moments, and pretending that yes, this is the most fascinating tale you've ever heard about cattle, poker, or a man named Jim who may or may not exist. It's part performance, part survival, and part wondering how you became this good at reacting to nonsense with genuine-looking interest. You quickly realise that conversation here is not casual, it is strategic. Not in a cold, calculating way, but in the sense that every word has a purpose, even if that purpose is simply to keep things moving smoothly. You become, in a very short amount of time, an expert listener. The kind of listener people dream about, attentive, responsive, never interrupting at the wrong moment. Which is impressive, considering you're often listening to stories that feel like they were assembled moments before being told. A man leans in, lowering his voice as if he's about to reveal a great secret. You nod. Of course you do, he begins. Something about a cattle drive, or a card game, or a cousin named Jim who once did something either heroic or deeply questionable. It's not entirely clear which. The details blur together, but the tone remains consistent. This is important. This matters. And so you treat it that way. You react at the right moments, or a small laugh here, a raised eyebrow there, a well-timed, really? That encourages the story to continue without requiring you to fully understand it. It's like guiding a conversation down a path that only one of you can see clearly. You start to notice patterns. There are the storytellers, men who have clearly been waiting all day for someone to listen. They don't need much encouragement. Just a nod, a prompt, and they're off, constructing entire narratives out of memory, imagination, and possibly a generous amount of exaggeration. Then there are the quiet ones. These are different. They don't fill the silence, they sit with it. And you learn quickly that silence here is not empty, it's an opportunity, a gentle question, a simple observation, something that opens the door just enough for them to step through, if they choose. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and that's fine, because part of the art is knowing when not to push. You adjust your approach constantly, tone, pace, expression. It's like learning a new language, one where words matter less than delivery. You can say almost anything as long as you say it the right way. You realise something else too. You're not just listening to stories, you're managing emotions, easing tension, encouraging confidence, creating a space where people feel seen, even if only temporarily. It's subtle, but powerful. And it's something you become surprisingly good at. Which raises an interesting question. When did you learn to do this? Because you don't remember a lesson. No one sat you down and explained the rules, and yet here you are, navigating conversations with the precision of someone who's been doing this for years. You smile again. This time it feels more natural, not entirely effortless, but closer. Because you're starting to understand that this isn't about pretending, it's about adapting, finding the version of yourself that fits this space, this moment, this interaction, and using it effectively. The stories continue. Some blur together. Some stand out for reasons you can't quite explain. A phrase, a laugh, a detail that sticks just long enough to be remembered later. You respond, you guide, you maintain the flow. And occasionally, when a story takes an unexpected turn, when it becomes so strange, so oddly specific that you almost question reality itself. You have to resist the urge to laugh for real. Because professionalism, apparently, includes not reacting to a grown man describing a goose-related incident with complete seriousness. You hold it together, barely, but successfully. And at the end of it, when the conversation winds down and the moment passes, you realise something quietly remarkable. You didn't just survive the interaction, you shaped it. Gently, subtly, but undeniably, which, in this world, is a skill worth more than it seems, even if it occasionally involves nodding along to stories that make absolutely no sense, and pretending that Jim, whoever he is the most interesting man you've ever heard of. Eventually you start recognising faces, the regulars. Some are kind, some are strange, and some feel like walking cautionary tales. They come back because they like familiarity, and you provide that, even if you're internally questioning everything. It's a strange kind of relationship built on routine and just enough connection to keep things manageable. At first, everyone blends together. Boots, hats, voices, stories. It's a constant stream of new faces and repeated patterns. But over time, something shifts. You start to notice details. The way someone walks in, the way they scan the room, the specific kind of confidence or lack of it they carry with them. And then one day, you recognize someone, not just vaguely, specifically. He walks in like he belongs there, not in an arrogant way, but in a familiar one. Like this place is part of his routine, as predictable as sunrise or bad coffee. You nod, he nods back. And just like that, an understanding is formed. No introductions needed. This is what they call a regular. And regulars are interesting. Some are easy. They come in, follow the same pattern, tell the same stories with slight variations, laugh at the same moments. There's comfort in that predictability. You know what to expect. They know what to expect. It's almost relaxing. Almost. Then there are the slightly more complicated ones. The ones who treat familiarity as an invitation to say things they probably shouldn't. Opinions that stretch longer than necessary. Jokes that land somewhere between amusing and deeply questionable. You navigate these carefully, because while familiarity is useful, it can also be misleading. You're still working, they are still customers, the balance remains. Some regulars bring a kind of quiet energy. They don't talk much. They don't demand attention. They simply return, again and again. There's something almost reassuring about them. A steady presence in a place that is otherwise constantly shifting. You find yourself appreciating these moments, not because they are easier, though sometimes they are, but because they require less adjustment, less effort to understand, less guesswork. Then there are the ones you recognize for entirely different reasons, the ones who arrive with chaos. You can feel it before they even speak. The energy shifts, the room tightens slightly, as if everyone is collectively preparing for something unpredictable. These are the regulars who keep things interesting. You brace yourself, mentally, emotionally, possibly spiritually. Because you know that whatever happens next will require a level of patience that borders on impressive. You handle it. Because by now you know how. You've learned the rhythms, the signals, the subtle ways to guide interactions without making it obvious. It's not perfect. It never is. But it works well enough. And that's the goal. Over time, something else happens. You start to remember things. Small details, a preference, a story, a name that isn't Jim. And when you bring it up, casually, naturally it lands. Because it matters. Not in a grand, life-changing way, but in a simple, human one. Recognition, familiarity, the feeling of being remembered. It creates a connection, even if temporary. And in this world, temporary connections are often all you have. You begin to understand why they come back. It's not just the service, it's the consistency. the sense that in a life full of uncertainty, there is one place where things feel known, predictable, safe in its own way. And you are part of that, which is both empowering and slightly surreal, because you are building relationships that exist within very specific boundaries, clear, defined, and understood. You give just enough, they take just enough, and somewhere in between, a routine forms, one that repeats again and again, until it becomes familiar, until their faces stand out in the crowd, until their presence feels expected. And when they don't show up one day, you notice, not dramatically, just quietly. Because even in a place defined by constant change, there are patterns, and once you start seeing them, you can't unsee them, which means the next time the door opens and a familiar pair of boots steps inside, you're already ready, whether you want to be or not. Not everyone is predictable. Some customers arrive like a plot twist nobody asked for, loud, unpredictable, or convinced they're far more charming than reality suggests. These are the moments where your patience is tested, your acting skills are pushed to their limits, and you silently wish for a fast-forward button. You usually sense them before you fully see them. It starts with a shift in the room. Conversations pause half a second too long. Someone glances toward the door, then quickly looks away, as if eye contact might invite participation in whatever is about to happen. Then the door opens, and in walks confidence. Not quiet confidence, not calm, steady confidence. No, this is the kind of confidence that arrives loudly, like it brought its own background music and expects everyone to hear it. Boots hit the floor with unnecessary enthusiasm. A voice follows, already mid-sentence, as if the conversation started outside and simply continued indoors without checking if anyone else agreed. You don't panic. You've learned better than that. Instead, you observe. Because unpredictable customers are not all the same. Some are loud but harmless. Some are charming in a way that almost works if you tilt your perspective slightly and lower your expectations. And some require a bit more strategy. This one talks. A lot. He tells stories that grow in size as he speaks, like they're being inflated in real time. A small event becomes a grand adventure. A minor inconvenience turns into a heroic struggle. By the time he's halfway through, you're fairly certain that at least part of the story involves a version of reality that only exists in his imagination. You nod. Of course you do. You've mastered the art of selective belief, not agreeing, not disagreeing, just allowing. Because sometimes the goal isn't to correct the story, it's to survive it. He laughs loudly, often at his own jokes, which is both helpful and slightly concerning. You match the energy, but carefully. Too much enthusiasm, and you encourage more. Too little, and you risk offence. It's a balancing act. Like walking a tightrope while someone below is throwing opinions instead of tomatoes. Then there are the ones who don't talk much at all. Unpredictable in a different way. Quiet but not calm. Still but not relaxed. These require a different approach. You slow down, lower your tone, keep things simple. You create space, not pressure. It's less about guiding the conversation and more about making sure the silence doesn't turn into something uncomfortable. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then there are the truly unexpected moments, a sudden change in mood, a comment that comes out of nowhere, a reaction that doesn't match the situation. These are the moments where your instincts take over, where you rely on everything you've observed so far. You adjust, always adjusting. Because rigidity doesn't work here. Flexibility does. You become aware of your surroundings in a sharper way. Where the door is, who's nearby, whether the madam is within sight, which more often than not she is, watching, not interfering unless necessary. It's a quiet reassurance, like knowing there's a safety net even if you'd prefer not to test it. You guide the interaction gently, and steering it away from edges you'd rather not approach, a change in topic, a shift in tone, a well-timed pause, and slowly, gradually. Things settle, not perfectly, but enough. The energy evens out. The conversation finds a rhythm, however unusual. The unpredictability softens into something manageable. And when it's over, when the moment passes and the customer moves on, you feel it. That small release of tension. You exhale. Not dramatically, just enough. Because you handled it. No chaos, no escalation, no story that will be repeated later with raised eyebrows and you won't believe what happened. Just another interaction. Another moment navigated. Another reminder that in this place control isn't about preventing unpredictability. It's about responding to it. Calmly, carefully, and with just enough patience to make it through. Even when someone insists they once outran a horse, on foot, uphill, in both directions. Despite the chaos, there are rules, clear, strict, and enforced. No fighting, no stealing, no causing trouble that could bring unwanted attention. The madam doesn't tolerate disruptions because disruptions cost money, and money in this world is everything. At first, the rules feel obvious, almost unnecessary to explain. Of course, there's no fighting. Of course, there's no stealing. Of course, you don't cause trouble in a place that depends on maintaining a very specific kind of order. And then you spend a little more time here, and you realize the rules are not just suggestions, they are survival tools. Because without them, this place would unravel faster than a poorly stitched hem. You start to notice how they're enforced, not loudly, not with grand displays, but consistently. A raised voice from across the room, just a little too sharp, a little too insistent. It cuts through the usual noise like a wrong note in a familiar song. Heads turn, briefly, the air shifts, and then the madam appears. Of course she does. She doesn't rush. She doesn't need to. She approaches the situation with the kind of calm that suggests she's done this before. Many times. Possibly more times than anyone involved would like to admit. She speaks, quietly, firmly, and whatever was about to happen doesn't. It dissolves, redirects, settles, because the rules are not optional. They are understood. You learn them quickly. Some are spoken. Others are absorbed through observation, like learning the rhythm of a song by hearing it enough times. Don't argue with customers in a way that draws attention. Don't let disagreements escalate. Don't take what isn't yours, even by accident. And most importantly, don't create problems that someone else has to solve. Because here, problems have consequences, not dramatic ones, practical ones. Loss of trust, loss of opportunity, loss of standing in a place where standing is already delicate. You begin to see how the rules protect you, not just the business, you, because without structure, this environment would become unpredictable in the worst possible way, the kind of unpredictability that doesn't resolve neatly, the kind that lingers. So you follow the rules, not reluctantly, not blindly, but with understanding. You see how they shape interactions, how they create boundaries where none might otherwise exist, how they allow a place like this to function without collapsing under its own weight. There are moments when the rules are tested. Of course there are. A customer who pushes a little too far, a disagreement that starts small and threatens to grow, a situation that hovers on the edge of becoming something more. And each time, the response is the same. Calm, controlled, immediate. The madam steps in when necessary. Others adjust when they see it happening. The structure holds. It always holds. Because it has to. You start to internalize it. The awareness, the understanding that your actions are part of a larger system. That what you do doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone here. It's a strange kind of responsibility, shared but individual. You carry it quietly, because it becomes second nature. And over time, something shifts. The rules stop feeling like restrictions and start feeling like support, a framework, a set of invisible lines that keep everything in place, including you, which, in a place like this, is more valuable than it sounds, even if it means occasionally stopping yourself from saying exactly what you're thinking. Especially then, you start to understand the financial system, and it's complicated. You earn money, yes, but a portion goes to the house, for your room, your meals, your clothes, your existence. It's like having a paycheck that politely disappears before you can enjoy it. You learn to budget, or at least to try. At first, it feels simple. You work, you get paid, end of story, except it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a much longer, more detailed explanation that slowly unfolds over time. Usually at moments when you thought you understood things perfectly well. You earn money from your work, yes. That part is real. You see it, you feel it, it exists. And then, gently but firmly, it begins to distribute itself. A portion goes to the house, for your room, for your meals, for your clothing, for the ongoing privilege of existing within these walls. It's not presented as a loss, it's presented as a system. And technically, it is. You start to notice how it works, carefully. Because if you don't pay attention, it becomes confusing very quickly. You keep track of what you earn, mentally at first, then more deliberately. Small calculations running quietly in the background of your thoughts. If this, then that. If today goes well, then maybe. But there's always a deduction. Always a portion that shifts away before you can fully claim it. You don't argue, because you understand. This place provides something. Structure, safety, opportunity, and those things come with a cost. Still, it's an adjustment. You begin to think differently about money, not as something you have, but as something that moves, in and out, back and forth, never quite settling in one place for too long. You learn to plan, or at least to try, setting aside small amounts when you can, thinking ahead, even if the future feels uncertain. It's not easy. The temptation to spend is always there. Small comforts, little things that make the day feel lighter. But you balance it, as best you can. You talk to the other workers, quiet conversations about earnings, about saving, about what works and what doesn't. There's no single strategy, just shared experience, advice passed along like small, valuable pieces of information. You realise something important. Everyone is navigating this, not perfectly, but persistently. You begin to see money differently, not just as currency, but as possibility. Limited, shifting, sometimes frustrating, but still meaningful. Because even small amounts can represent something larger, a step, a choice, a future that might look different from this one. You hold on to that, not tightly, just enough. Because in a place where so much is immediate, today, tonight, the next moment, thinking beyond that is both difficult and necessary. You count what you have, not obsessively, just carefully. Because every coin matters, every decision carries weight, and while you may not keep as much as you earn, what you do keep, that's yours, to manage, to protect, to build into something more, even if it takes time, even if it feels slow, because here progress isn't measured in leaps, it's measured in small, steady steps, and you are taking them, one day at a time, one coin at a time, hoping that eventually they lead somewhere new. There are moments between customers, brief pauses where you can sit, breathe and pretend you're relaxing. But it's never complete. There's always noise, always movement, always the sense that something is about to happen. It's rest, but with an asterisk. You learn very quickly that downtime here is not the same as rest. It's more like waiting with slightly better posture. You find a chair, or a corner, or a place along the wall where you can exist without being immediately needed. You sit carefully, as if even sitting has rules you haven't fully memorized yet. Your body welcomes the pause. Your feet, especially, seem grateful in a way that feels almost emotional. For a moment you exhale, not dramatically, just enough to feel it. Around you, the house continues. It always continues. The piano doesn't stop, it just softens, like it's giving you permission to pretend this is peaceful. Voices drift in and out, conversations overlapping in a way that makes it impossible to follow any single one completely. Laughter rises, falls, repeats. You close your eyes, just for a second, and immediately your mind starts to wander, not far, not into dreams or deep thoughts, just away, to quieter places, simpler moments. The idea of sitting somewhere without needing to listen, respond, or anticipate what comes next. A place where silence isn't something you have to create, it's just there. Then a chair scrapes nearby, and you're back. Because even in downtime, you're never fully off. You're aware of the room, the movement, the subtle shifts in energy that signal something is about to happen. A new customer entering, a conversation turning, a glance in your direction that lingers just long enough to mean something. You open your eyes, adjust slightly, back into position. You watch the other workers. Some sit like you, quietly reclaiming a moment. Others chat, exchanging quick stories or observations, small bursts of connection that feel almost normal. There's a shared understanding here. This is your time, even if it's limited. You take a sip of water, or whatever is available. It's not refreshing in the way you imagine, but it helps. You stretch your hands, flex your fingers, roll your shoulders just enough to ease the tension without drawing attention. It's a subtle kind of self-care, the kind that fits into the spaces between everything else. Time moves strangely here. Minutes feel longer, but they also disappear quickly. You think you've been sitting for a while, only to realize it's been barely a moment. Or the opposite, you blink and suddenly the pause is over. Because it always ends. Sometimes gently. A familiar face approaching. A conversation beginning naturally. Sometimes abruptly. A voice calling your name. Or simply the unspoken understanding that it's time to step back into the flow. You stand. Not reluctantly. Just knowingly. Because you've learned that resisting the rhythm doesn't change it. It just makes it harder. Yeah, so you take what you can from these moments. A breath, a pause, a brief sense of stillness in a place that rarely allows it. You don't expect more, because expecting more leads to disappointment, and disappointment is not particularly useful here. Instead, you adjust your expectations. Downtime isn't about escaping. It's about recharging just enough to keep going. And sometimes, that's enough. Even if it comes with noise, even if it's temporary, even if it feels like trying to nap in the middle of a conversation you didn't ask to join, you make it work. Because that's what you do now. You take the moments you're given, and you use them, however small they may be. The other workers become your closest companions. You share stories, laughs, frustrations, and the occasional eye roll that says everything without a word. It's a strange kind of bond formed in a place where everyone understands exactly what the others are going through. At first they are just there, faces in the room, voices in the background, movements you notice without fully registering. You're focused on yourself, on learning the rhythms, on not making mistakes that feel bigger than they probably are. But slowly, without you realizing it, that changes. You start to recognize patterns. The way one of them always laughs a little too loudly at something that isn't quite that funny, but somehow makes it funnier anyway. The way another adjusts her dress in the mirror with a precision that suggests she's done it 1,000 times and still isn't satisfied. The quiet one who doesn't say much but notices everything. You begin to understand them, not completely, but enough. Conversation starts small. A comment here, a shared look there. Something simple, like complaining about the coffee, which, as you've already established, deserves it. You respond, they respond back. And just like that, a connection forms. It's not dramatic. No grand declarations of friendship. Just familiarity. And in a place like this, familiarity is powerful. You find yourself sitting with them during those brief moments of downtime, listening to stories that are different from the ones you hear from customers. These are real, less polished, less exaggerated, still occasionally unbelievable, but in a way that feels grounded rather than performed. They talk about where they came from, why they're here, not always in detail, just enough. There's a shared understanding that some stories don't need to be told fully to be understood. So, you laugh together. Not the practiced laugh you use in the main room, a real one, softer, quieter, slightly more relaxed. It feels different. You didn't expect that. You also didn't expect how quickly they start to look out for you. Small things at first, a quick piece of advice, a warning about a particular customer, a subtle nudge in the right direction when you're unsure. Nothing overwhelming, just enough to help, because they've been where you are. They remember what it felt like to be new, to not know the unspoken rules, to second guess every decision. So they help, not out of obligation, but because it's easier when you're not doing it alone. Of course, it's not perfect. No group ever is. There are moments of tension, differences in personality, small disagreements that flare up and then fade away just as quickly. It's a shared space, a shared experience, and sometimes that means friction, but even that feels normal, because underneath it all there's something steady, a sense that you are all navigating the same world just from slightly different angles. You start to rely on them, not completely, but more than you expected. A glance across the room that says, "Are you seeing this?" A quiet moment of shared understanding when something absurd happens, which is more often than you would think. And sometimes, when the day feels heavier than usual, when the noise is louder, the energy more draining, they're there, not fixing it, just being there. And somehow that helps. You realise something, sitting among them, listening to the soft rhythm of their voices. This place is not what you imagined. It's harder in some ways, but in others, it's more human. Because even here, in a place built on transactions and appearances, real connections still find a way through. Unexpected, unplanned, but very real. And as you sit there, sharing a quiet moment before the next wave begins, you understand that you are no longer just part of the house. You are part of something else, something quieter, something that doesn't need to be announced. A kind of family, unusual, imperfect, but yours for now. Step outside, and the world shifts. Inside, you're part of a system. Outside, you're a story, one that people think they already understand. Some judge, some pretend not to notice, and some are a little too interested. Reputation follows you like a shadow, whether you like it or not. Let's step outside for a moment. Not far, just enough to feel the difference. The door closes behind you, and immediately the world changes. The noise softens, not because the town is quieter, but because it's different. Less contained, more spread out. Horses in the distance, wheels against dirt. Voices that carry and fade without walls to hold them in place. The air feels cleaner, or maybe just less concentrated. You take a breath, and then you feel it. Not physically, socially, the awareness. Because inside, you are part of the structure. A role, a function, something understood, even if it's not always spoken out loud. Outside, you're something else, a story, and the town already thinks it knows how that story goes. You walk steady, not too fast, not too slow. There's a certain way to carry yourself out here, confident enough to avoid drawing attention, but not so confident that it invites it. It's a delicate balance. Like everything else, you pass people. Some glance at you briefly, then look away. The kind of look that says, I know, but I'm not going to say anything. Not here, not now. Others don't look at all, which strangely is more noticeable, because it feels intentional, like ignoring something so hard that it becomes its own form of acknowledgement. And then there are the ones who do look, a little too long, a little too curious. Their expressions vary, judgment sometimes, curiosity often, recognition more than you expected. You keep walking, because stopping would make it a moment, and you've learned that not every moment needs to be acknowledged. You hear things, not directly, never directly, but fragments, a word here, a tone there, enough to understand, because reputation in a place like this doesn't require confirmation. As it builds itself, quietly, persistently, you realise something important. People don't see you as you see yourself. They see a version, simplified, categorised, placed neatly into whatever understanding they already have, and there's not much you can do about that. At first, it bothers you. Of course it does. The idea that your story is being told without your input, that people have decided who you are based on where you work, what you do, and the assumptions that come with it. But over time, it shifts, not because it stops happening, but because you stop letting it define you. You understand the difference between inside and outside. Inside you are complex, capable, adaptive. Outside, you are a symbol. And symbols are rarely accurate. You adjust. Again, because that's what you do. Human, you learn how to move through the town without carrying every glance, every assumption, every unspoken comment with you. You let them pass like dust in the air, present but not permanent. Sometimes, though, something unexpected happens. A kindness, small, brief. Someone who speaks to you normally, without hesitation, without the careful distance others maintain. It catches you off guard, in a good way, because it reminds you that not everyone sees the same story, not everyone follows the same script. You hold on to those moments, not tightly, just enough, because they matter. You continue walking, eventually turning back toward the house. The door is still there, the same as before. You step inside, and just like that, the shift happens again. The noise returns, the structure, the rhythm. You're back in the system, back in the role. But something feels slightly different. Not heavier, just clearer. Because now you understand both sides, the inside and the outside, and how they don't always match, which, in a way, makes it easier to exist in both, even if the world insists on seeing only one. Cleanliness is important, but resources are limited. Bathing isn't a daily luxury, and you become very familiar with quick washes and creative solutions. It's not exactly spa-level care, but you make it work. Let's talk about cleanliness, or more accurately, let's talk about the idea of cleanliness, because in this environment it's less about perfection and more about effort. You return to your room, or the wash area when it's available, and begin the process. Not a long luxurious routine, no scented soaps that promise transformation, no endless supply of hot water waiting patiently for you to enjoy. Instead, you have what's there, a basin, a pitcher. Water, that is, more often than not, cool. You pour it slowly, watching it settle, as if it might somehow warm itself through sheer optimism. It does not. You dip the cloth in, pause, mentally prepare, and then quickly you begin. Face first. Always the face. A sharp, immediate wake-up call that clears your thoughts whether you ask for it or not. You wipe carefully, methodically, focusing on the parts that matter most, the parts that people see, the parts that define first impressions, then your hands, your neck, small efficient movements that aim for maximum effect with minimal resources. You become very good at this, because you have to. Bathing, in the full sense of the word, is occasional, when time allows, when resources are available, when the opportunity presents itself in a way that doesn't interfere with everything else you're expected to do, and when it does happen, it feels almost luxurious. Not because it's perfect, but because it's complete. For a moment you can relax into it. Let the water do its job without rushing, without calculating how long you have before someone knocks or calls your name. But those moments are rare, so you adapt. You learn the shortcuts, the essentials, what can be done quickly, and what absolutely cannot be skipped. You become aware of scents in a way you never were before. Perfume isn't just decoration, it's strategy, applied carefully, not to overwhelm, but to enhance, to create an impression that lingers just long enough to suggest something more. You learn how much is enough, and how much is too much. It's a fine line, like everything else. Clothing plays a role too, clean when possible, maintained as best as you can. You notice wear and tear quickly now, loose threads, fading fabric, small imperfections that might not have mattered before but now feel more significant. Because presentation matters, even when conditions are less than ideal. You talk to the other workers, share small tips, what works, what doesn't, how to manage when supplies run low or time runs short. There's a quiet exchange of knowledge here, practical, immediate, helpful, because everyone is dealing with the same limitations, and everyone is finding their own way through them. You realise something. Cleanliness here is not about luxury, it's about control, a way to maintain a sense of self in an environment that doesn't always make that easy. A routine, a process, a small daily act that says, I am still here, I am still taking care of myself, even if it's not perfect, even if it's rushed, even if it involves water that feels like it came straight from a mountain stream with no regard for your comfort. You finish, dry your hands, adjust your appearance slightly and step back. It's enough, not ideal, not effortless, but enough. And here, enough is something to appreciate. The house is rarely quiet. There's always music, laughter, or someone telling a story that may or may not be true. The piano player deserves a medal for persistence, because they play through everything. It's lively, chaotic, and oddly comforting. You begin to notice that the music never really stops. Not completely. It fades, it softens, it shifts in intensity, but it's always there. The piano sits in the corner like a determined companion, slightly out of tune but unwavering in its purpose. The player, whoever happens to be there at the time, keeps going with a level of commitment that borders on impressive, or concerning, depending on how long you've been listening. At first, you hear it as background noise, a constant presence that fills the space between conversations, something to soften the edges of silence, to keep the room from feeling too exposed. But over time, it becomes more than that. It becomes a rhythm, a guide. The tempo of the room seems to follow it, even when no one is paying direct attention. Conversations rise and fall in time with the music. Laughter fits into the spaces between notes. Movement aligns subtly with the flow. It's not planned, but it works. And you find yourself noticing specific melodies, recognizing patterns. There's one tune that seems to appear more often than the others, familiar, repetitive, oddly comforting in its predictability. You don't know the name, you're not sure anyone does, but you know it, and when it starts you feel it, that small shift of recognition. You glance toward the piano, The player nods slightly as if acknowledging the moment without interrupting it. It's a quiet connection. Music, here, does something interesting. It fills space, not just physically, but emotionally. It gives people something to hold on to when conversations falter, something to lean into when the room feels too full, too loud, too unpredictable. It smooths things out, not perfectly, but enough. Then there's the laughter. Always laughter. Some of it genuine, some of it practiced, most of it somewhere in between. It blends with the music, creating a kind of atmosphere that feels alive, even when you're tired, even when you'd rather sit in silence for just a moment. You adapt to it. Of course you do. At first it feels overwhelming, too much sound, too many layers, but eventually your mind learns to filter it, to focus when needed, to let the rest fade into the background. It becomes normal, which is both impressive and slightly alarming, because when something like this becomes normal, you start to wonder what your definition of quiet used to be. You try to remember a room with no music, no overlapping voices, no constant hum of activity. It feels distant, almost imaginary. And then you realize you don't miss it as much as you thought you would, because this in its own way has become familiar. Predictable in its unpredictability, structured in its chaos. You move through the room, the music following you without actually moving. A constant companion that doesn't ask for attention but always receives it. And occasionally, when the melody hits just the right note at just the right moment, it feels almost peaceful, not because it's quiet, but because it fits, because it belongs, because you belong in it too, at least for now. And so the piano continues, relentless, slightly off-key, completely essential, playing through everything, just like you. Despite the Wild West reputation, brothels were often among the more regulated spaces. Security exists, rules are enforced, and the madam ensures things don't spiral out of control. It's not perfectly safe, but it's more structured than you expected. Let's clear something up. The world outside might feel unpredictable. Dusty streets, shifting fortunes, people arriving and leaving with stories that may or may not be true. But inside here, there's structure, more than you expected, because despite everything, the noise, the chaos, the constant movement, this place is not lawless. It can't be. If it were, it wouldn't last. You start to notice the signs of it. Subtle at first. A man near the door who doesn't seem to be there for the same reasons as everyone else. He watches more than he participates. His posture is different. His attention sharper. Not a customer, something else. You realize quickly this is part of the system. Security, even if no one calls it that out loud. There are rules, yes, but rules only work if someone is there to enforce them, and here, someone always is. You see how situations are handled. Not dramatically, not with loud confrontations or unnecessary displays, but firmly. A raised voice is met with a calm response. A situation that begins to escalate is redirected before it fully forms. It's like watching a fire being managed before it becomes a problem. Controlled, intentional, effective. You feel it in the way the room responds. People understand the boundaries, even the unpredictable ones, because they know, whether consciously or not, that this place operates differently. It has to. For everyone involved, you start to relax. Not completely, but enough. Because there's a difference between constant danger and managed risk. And this is managed. You still stay aware. Of course you do. You've learned too much not to. You notice exits, positions, the general flow of the room. It becomes second nature, like adjusting your posture or choosing the right tone in a conversation. Awareness is part of survival, but now it feels less like fear and more like understanding. You trust the system, not blindly, but realistically. You see how it works, how the madam oversees everything, how others step in when needed, how the structure holds even when things begin to shift. It's not perfect, nothing here is, but it's consistent, reliable in its own way. And that matters, because in a place where so much changes, faces, stories, moments, having something that stays steady is grounding. You move through the space differently now. More confident, less hesitant, because you know that while things can go wrong, they're less likely to go completely out of control, and that makes a difference. A quiet one, but a real one. Yes, you take a breath, in, out, and for a moment you realize something surprising. You feel safe, not entirely, not in the way you might define it elsewhere, but enough to do your job, enough to exist without constant tension, enough to trust that if something shifts too far, someone will step in and bring it back, which in a world like this is more than you expected and more than you might have hoped for. Let's talk about the part no one advertises, not the dresses, not the money, not the piano that refuses to retire. The quiet, constant effort of holding your expression steady, your tone warm, your reactions measured, even when your energy has quietly packed its bags and left without notice. Because this job is not just physical, it's emotional, and it's persistent. You wake up some days already tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that sits somewhere behind your eyes and refuses to move. The kind that says, maybe today we simply exist, which is a lovely idea in theory and completely incompatible with what your day actually requires. So you prepare, you smooth your dress, adjust your hair, and then you prepare your face. That sounds dramatic. It's not. It's practical. You look in the mirror and practice neutrality first. A calm, steady expression that doesn't give too much away. Then you add the smile, not a wide one, not forced, just enough to soften the edges. You hold it, release it, try again. It's like stretching a muscle you didn't know existed. And once you step out into the main room, that muscle gets a full workout. Because every interaction asks something of you. A story that requires interest. A joke that needs a laugh. A silence that needs to feel comfortable instead of awkward. You become fluent in responding, not just with words, but with presence. You lean in slightly when someone speaks, as if their story's the most important thing you've heard all day. You nod at the right moments. You react with just enough energy to keep the conversation alive without exhausting yourself. It's a balance, always a balance. And some days it's easier. The rhythm flows. The interactions feel lighter. You find yourself smiling without thinking about it, laughing in ways that feel almost natural. Those days are good. You hold on to them. Then there are the other days, the ones where every smile feels like lifting something heavier than it should be, where every conversation takes a little more effort, where you become acutely aware of how much you're giving moment by moment. You manage it because you've learned how. You pace yourself. You take those small moments of downtime seriously, not because they're long, but because they're necessary. A breath, a pause, a chance to let your face rest, your voice settle back into something quieter. You learn tricks, little resets, looking away for just a second, rolling your shoulders, taking a sip of water and letting it be more than just a sip, letting it be a moment. You also learn what not to carry. Not every story needs to stay with you. Not every comment deserves space in your thoughts. You let things pass through you rather than settle. It's not easy, but it's possible. You notice the others doing the same. The shared understanding is unspoken but clear. A glance across the room that says, "I see you." A small smile that isn't part of the performance. A moment of real connection in the middle of everything else. It helps more than you expected. Because while the work asks you to give emotionally, you're not doing it alone, and that makes a difference. A quiet one, but a real one. At the end of an interaction, when the conversation fades and the moment passes, you feel it. That small shift. The release. You drop the smile, not completely, but enough to feel the difference. Your face relaxes. Your shoulders lower slightly. You reset. Ready for the next one. Because there is always a next one. And you will meet it the same way. With presence. With patience. With just enough of yourself to make it work. Even on the days when you'd rather not. Especially on those days. Because this is part of the job, the invisible part. The part no one sees, but everyone feels. And somehow, you're getting very good at it. You start to notice the little things. A genuinely funny moment, a kind word, a shared joke with another worker. These small moments become surprisingly important, like tiny anchors in an otherwise unpredictable day. At first, you don't expect joy to be part of this. Not really. You expect routine, effort, adaptation. But joy? That feels like something that belongs somewhere else. Somewhere quieter, somewhere simpler. And yet, it shows up, quietly, unexpectedly. You're standing in the middle of a conversation that's going exactly how you expected. Predictable, steady, manageable. When suddenly something shifts. A comment lands just right. A response you didn't plan comes out naturally. And you laugh. Not the practiced laugh, the real one. It surprises you. Because for a moment you forget to perform. You just react. It's brief, but it stays with you. Then there are the smaller moments. The ones that don't announce themselves. A glance across the room at one of the other workers, right as something mildly absurd happens. You both notice it at the same time. You both try not to react. And then, just for a second, you do. A shared look. A barely contained smile. It's enough. It says everything without words. You start to collect these moments. Not intentionally. But they gather anyway. A kind word from someone you didn't expect it from. Simple. Uncomplicated. Genuine. It lingers. Because kindness here isn't always dramatic, it's subtle. A small shift in tone, a moment of patience, a recognition that you're doing your best, and sometimes that's all it takes. You also find joy in routine. Not the entire routine, let's not get carried away, but parts of it. The familiarity of certain faces, the predictability of certain interactions, the way some things unfold exactly as you expect, in a way that feels manageable. There's comfort in that. You didn't think there would be, but there is. You notice the music differently too, not just as background noise, but as something that occasionally aligns perfectly with the moment. A tune that feels lighter than usual, a rhythm that matches your mood just enough to make things feel easier. It's subtle, but it matters. Then there are the quiet victories. Moments where something could have gone wrong and didn't. A difficult interaction that resolves smoothly. A situation you navigate successfully without even realizing how much skill it required until afterward. You acknowledge it, not with celebration, just recognition. Because those moments count. You start to see the day not as one long stretch, but as a series of small pieces. Some harder than others, some lighter than expected, and scattered throughout. These small, quiet joys. They don't change everything. They don't erase the challenges, but they balance them. Just enough. You hold on to them, not tightly, but intentionally. Because they remind you of something important. That even in a place defined by structure, by routine, by expectation, there is still room for something real, something unscripted, something that belongs entirely to you. A laugh, a look, a moment. And as the day continues, Then, as the rhythm carries you forward once again, you find yourself noticing them more, these small lights in unexpected places, and somehow they make everything feel just a little bit easier. By the time evening rolls around, you're tired in ways you didn't know were possible. It's not just physical, it's mental, emotional, everything all at once. But the day isn't over yet. Let's be honest. You thought you understood tired before this. You've had long days, busy days, the kind of days where you sit down at the end and think, that was a lot. This is different. This is the kind of tired that builds gradually, almost politely throughout the day, until suddenly it isn't polite anymore. It's just there, everywhere. You feel it first in your feet, a dull, steady reminder that you have been standing and moving, adjusting for longer than your body would prefer. Each step becomes slightly more deliberate, as if your feet are negotiating with you. We will continue, they seem to say, but we would like it noted that we are not thrilled about it. You acknowledge this silently, because arguing with your own feet feels unproductive. Then your shoulders, a subtle tightness that grows over time, not sharp, not unbearable, just persistent. The kind of tension that makes you roll them back occasionally, hoping for relief that arrives in small temporary waves. Your voice, too. You don't notice it at first, but after hours of conversation, listening, responding, maintaining tone, you begin to feel it. Not pain exactly, just a slight strain, a reminder that even speaking requires energy. And then there's the rest. The part that's harder to define, mental. Emotional, the constant awareness, the continuous adjustment, the quiet effort of being present moment after moment without fully stepping away. It adds up, slowly, consistently, until you realize you're tired in layers, not one kind of tired, all of them, at once. You move through the room, still steady, still composed, but more aware now of the effort behind it. The way each interaction requires a little more focus than it did earlier. The way your responses take just a fraction longer to form. You compensate, because that's what you do. You lean on routine, on the patterns you've learned, on the instincts that now guide you without needing constant attention. It helps, but it doesn't erase the feeling. You find a moment brief but enough. A pause. You sit or lean or simply stand still for a second longer than usual. And you feel it, the weight of the day, not overwhelming, just present. You close your eyes for a second, not long enough to drift, just long enough to reset. You breathe, in, out. It helps, a little. Then you open your eyes, because the day is still happening. It hasn't paused for you, it hasn't slowed down. It continues, and so do you. You return to the rhythm. Step back into the flow. Another conversation, another moment, another small piece of the day that needs your attention. You handle it. Because you've made it this far. And there's something about that realization that gives you just enough energy to keep going. Not a second wind. More like a steady continuation. You adjust your posture again, lift your head slightly, find that balance between effort and ease, even when ease feels distant, and you continue. Because the day isn't over. Not yet, but it will be, eventually, and when it is, you know exactly what you'll do. You'll sit, you'll breathe, and you'll appreciate in the quietest way possible that you made it through. One long layered, exhausting day, which, here, is something worth recognizing. Eventually, the night begins to wind down. Not all at once, and certainly not in a neat, satisfying way, but gradually, like a conversation that keeps trying to end but somehow continues anyway. The piano softens, the laughter becomes less frequent, and the energy of the room shifts from lively to tired but committed. You notice it first in the gaps, small pauses where there used to be constant motion. A moment when no one is speaking, followed quickly by someone deciding that silence is unacceptable and filling it again. Stabbed with less enthusiasm than before, the customers begin to thin out. Not dramatically. No grand exit. Just one or two leaving at a time, their absence creating a subtle change in the room. Chairs sit empty a little longer. Conversations don't overlap quite as much. You move differently now. Less urgency, more intention. The rhythm slows and you follow it, your body quietly grateful for the shift. Your feet, in particular, seem to approve. They've been negotiating all day, and now, finally, they see progress. You adjust your posture, not to impress, but to maintain. There's a difference. Earlier, every movement had purpose tied to presentation. Now it's about getting through the final stretch with some version of dignity and tact. The piano continues. Of course it does, but softer now, less determined, almost reflective, as if even the player is acknowledging that the night is coming to an end. You glance around the room. It looks different. Not empty, but less full. The edges of the space become more visible. The details you didn't notice earlier, small marks on the floor, the way the light settles in certain corners, start to stand out. It feels real. Less like a performance, more like a place. You interact with the remaining customers, but the tone has changed. There's less pressure, less need to maintain a certain level of energy. Conversations are shorter, simpler, sometimes quieter. You find yourself appreciating that. Not because it's easier, but because it feels closer to something genuine. A final laugh, a last exchange, then another departure, and another, until the room reaches that point where everyone knows it's almost over. But no one says it out loud, because saying it would make it official. And somehow, unofficial endings feel better. Eventually the last customer leaves. The door closes, and for a moment, there is a kind of quiet. Not silence, but close. Closer than you've experienced all day. You stand there feeling it, the absence of constant motion, the release of expectation, the shift from onto something slightly less demanding. It's subtle, but it's everything. You exhale. A deeper breath this time, one you didn't realize you were holding. Around you, the others begin to move differently too. Shoulders drop, voices soften. There's a shared understanding that the work part of the day is ending. Not the responsibilities, but the performance. You help with small tasks, straightening things, moving items back into place, nothing overwhelming. Just enough to transition from one phase of the day to another. It's almost peaceful, in a way you didn't expect, because after hours of noise, of movement, of constant interaction, this slowing down feels earned. You take one last look around the room, the same room, but different now, quieter, softer, finished for the moment, and you realize something. You made it, through the entire day, from that first reluctant morning moment to this quiet, almost gentle ending, which, considering everything, feels like an accomplishment, even if no one announces it. Even if it happens every day, because each day is its own story, and tonight, this one is done. When it's over, you return to your room, exhausted but relieved. You remove the layers of the day, your outfit, your expression, the constant awareness, and for a moment, it's just you again. You close the door behind you, and this time, it feels different. Not just a pause, not a temporary break between moments. This is the end. Or at least, the closest version of an end you get here. You lean back against the door for a second, letting the quiet settle around you. The sounds of the house are still there, faint, distant, but they no longer demand your attention. You are off, not completely removed from the world outside your door, but no longer required to respond to it. You move slowly, not because you have to, but because you can. Each step feels deliberate, like your body is reminding you that there is no rush now, no immediate expectation, no need to be anything other than what you are in this moment. Tired. You reach for your dress, undoing the small, careful adjustments that held it in place throughout the day. The ribbons, the fastenings, the details that once felt important now feel like weight you're ready to set down. You remove them one by one. Each piece feels like shedding a layer, not just of clothing, but of the role you've been carrying. You place them aside, not carelessly, but without the same attention you gave them earlier. There's no audience here, no need to present anything. It's just you. You move to the wash basin again. The water is still cool. Of course it is, but this time it feels different. Less like a shock, more like a relief. You wash slowly, not rushing through it, letting the process take its time, removing the day in small, careful motions. Your face, your hands, your neck. Simple actions, but meaningful, because this is your way of resetting, of returning to yourself. You catch your reflection in the mirror, and for a moment you pause, because the person looking back at you is quieter now, less constructed, more real. You don't adjust anything. You don't need to. You sit on the edge of the bed. It creaks, as expected. But now it feels less like a complaint and more like a familiar sound. Something you recognize. Something that belongs to this part of your day. You remove your shoes, slowly, carefully. Your feet immediately notice the difference. Relief spreads upward, subtle but undeniable. You flex your toes slightly as if confirming that they still exist. They do. Barely. You lie back. The mattress shifts beneath you, settling into place. You stare at the ceiling, and for the first time all day, there is nothing required of you. No conversations, no expectations. No performance, just rest. Your thoughts drift, not far, just enough to acknowledge the day, the moments, the interactions, the small victories, the quiet challenges. You don't analyze them, you just let them pass, because tomorrow will come. It always does, with its own rhythm, its own demands, but for now, you are here, in this small, imperfect room, finally still, finally off your feet, and that is enough. As you lie there, you think about everything, the strange, the difficult, the oddly funny. Life here isn't what you imagined, but you've adapted. You've survived the day, and tomorrow you'll do it again. You lie there, staring at the ceiling that has quietly witnessed more than it will ever reveal, and for once, there is no immediate next step, no one calling your name, no door opening. Yeah, no music insisting that the moment be filled. Just you, and the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing. You let the day replay, not in full detail, not scene by scene, but in fragments. Small pieces drifting through your thoughts like they're deciding whether they're worth remembering. Conversation that went better than expected. A moment that almost went wrong, but didn't. A laugh that caught you off guard. A glance from across the room that said, "We're still here." It's all there, mixed together. Strange, uneven, real. You think about how much you've adjusted. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually, in ways that only become clear when you stop moving long enough to notice. You've learned the rhythm, the unspoken rules, the balance between being present and protecting yourself. You've learned how to navigate conversations that go nowhere and somehow still lead somewhere useful. How to read a room without staring. How to step in, step back, and sometimes simply stand still and let things unfold. You didn't know you could do that, but you can. And you did. Today. You shift slightly on the bed, the mattress responding with its usual quiet protest. You almost smile, because even that feels familiar now. Part of the routine, part of the life you didn't plan, but are living anyway. You think about the others, the small moments you shared, the looks, the laughter, the quiet understanding that doesn't need explanation. It matters. More than you expected. Because in a place built on transactions, you found something that isn't transactional at all. Connection, not constant, not perfect, but real. You let that thought settle, then you think about tomorrow, not in detail, just the idea of it. Another morning, another round of getting ready, of stepping into the role, of moving through the same spaces with slightly different moments. It doesn't feel overwhelming, not right now, because you've already done it once, which means you can do it again. You take a deeper breath. In, out. Your body feels heavy now, not in a bad way, in a way that suggests it's finally ready to rest. Your thoughts begin to slow, the edges of the day softening, the details becoming less sharp. You don't hold on to anything too tightly. You let it all drift, because that's what this moment is for. Not analysing, not planning, just acknowledging. You made it through another full day in a world that asked a lot from you, and you met it step by step, moment by moment, without stopping, without giving up. And now you get to rest, which, after everything, feels like the most important part of all. Night in the brothel is not quiet. It never truly is. Even when things slow down, the building itself seems to hum with leftover energy. Floorboards creak like they're remembering every step taken that day. Somewhere, a door opens, then closes, then opens again because someone forgot something important, like their hat or their dignity. You lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, letting your eyes trace the faint cracks in the plaster above you. They form patterns if you look long enough, shapes that almost make sense until they don't. It's the kind of quiet activity your mind turns to when actual quiet is unavailable. The sounds drift in layers. Closest to you, there's the steady shifting of the building, wood settling, beds sighing under movement, a faint rustle of fabric from the room next door, followed by a voice trying very hard to sound charming and only partially succeeding. Further away, the hallway carries footsteps that echo just enough to make you wonder who's passing by. Boots, mostly. Always boots. Some heavy, confident, others slower, uncertain, like their owners are reconsidering every decision that led them here but continuing anyway. Then there's the downstairs noise, softer now but still present. Laughter that lingers a little too long. A piano that seems determined to finish what it started, even if it has forgotten how. The notes drift upward, slightly uneven, like they're climbing stairs they're not entirely sure they can handle. And beneath it all, voices. Fragments of conversation slip through the walls, rearranging themselves into something almost dreamlike. You catch pieces. Told him I'd never, and then the horse just, no, you don't understand, Jim. You never hear the full story. Just enough to imagine one, which is somehow more exhausting than hearing the truth. At first it keeps you awake. Every sound feels like it demands your attention, but over time something shifts. The noise becomes familiar, predictable in its unpredictability. You start to recognize patterns. The late-night regular who laughs the same way every time, the floorboard outside your door that complains louder than the others, the exact moment when the piano finally gives up for the night. It becomes a kind of rhythm, not peaceful exactly, but steady, and your body learns to rest within it. Oh, the way people sleep through rain or distant thunder. You pull the thin blanket a little closer, even though it doesn't do much. It's more of a gesture than a solution, a small attempt at comfort in a place that offers it sparingly. Somewhere down the hall, a door shuts with a finality that suggests the night is, at last, beginning to wind down. The laughter fades. The footsteps grow fewer. The building exhales. And eventually, despite everything, your eyes grow heavy. Not because it's quiet, but because you've learned how to rest inside the noise. Every now and then, someone gets a letter. It doesn't happen often, which is why it matters when it does. Letters are not casual things here. They don't arrive quickly and they don't arrive easily. Each one has travelled across distance and time, carried by hands that don't know you, through towns that don't care about your story. So when one appears, it carries weight. You notice it immediately. A small envelope, slightly worn at the edges, its surface marked by a journey you can only imagine. The handwriting is careful, sometimes uneven, as if the person who wrote it took extra time with every word. The room changes when it's handed over. Whoever receives it goes quiet in a way that feels different from the usual pauses. Not the tired silence of the end of a long day, but something softer, something more focused. You watch, even if you try not to. They turned it over in their hands first, as if confirming it's real, as if it might disappear if opened too quickly. There's a hesitation there, a moment where the past and present sit side by side, neither quite ready to move. Then slowly they open it. The sound of paper unfolding is surprisingly loud. Inside, the contents are rarely dramatic. No grand speeches, no life-changing revelations. Just life. A mother writing about the weather, a sibling mentioning a new job, a neighbour asking if you're ever coming back, phrased in a way that doesn't quite expect an answer. Sometimes there's concern, carefully disguised as casual curiosity. Hope you're doing well. Things are quiet here. We miss you. Simple words, heavy meanings. As they read, their expression shifts in small ways. A faint smile, a tightening around the eyes, a pause that lasts just a second too long. For that moment, the brothel disappears. The noise fades into something distant, like it's happening in another building entirely. The walls feel less present, the air less heavy. You can almost see it in their posture, or they're somewhere else, back in a place where the nights are quieter, where the air smells different, where their name is spoken without expectation attached to it. It's not always a happy place, but it's theirs. Then, eventually, the letter ends. It always ends. There's a small pause after the last line, as if they're hoping there might be more if they look again. Then the paper is folded carefully, more carefully than necessary, and tucked away somewhere safe. The world returns. The noise comes back first, then the movement, then the expectations. Someone calls their name, and just like that, they're here again. But something lingers. A quiet reminder that there is, or was, another version of life. One that still exists somewhere, even if it feels very far away. There are days when you almost feel in control. It doesn't happen all at once. It builds slowly, without announcing itself. One morning you wake up and realize that the place feels familiar, not comfortable exactly, but known. You know the sounds before they happen, the rhythm of the day, the way the light hits the hallway at a certain hour, the tone of the madam's voice when she's in a good mood and when she's very much not. You've learned things, small things, important things. Which customers are polite, which ones talk too much, which ones require patience, and which ones require a kind of quiet distance that says everything without words. You begin to anticipate instead of react, and that feels like control. You adjust your approach. You guide conversations. You steer situations gently, like nudging a boat in the right direction without making it obvious you're doing it. You smile at the right moments, laugh when expected, redirect when necessary. It becomes a skill, a quiet, practiced performance that creates the impression that everything is going exactly as planned. And for a while, it works. The day flows more smoothly. The interactions feel manageable. Even the unexpected moments seem less overwhelming because you've learned how to respond. You start to believe, just a little, that you've figured it out. But then something shifts. It's always something small at first. A new face that doesn't follow the usual patterns. A mood in the house that feels slightly off. A conversation that takes a turn you didn't anticipate. And suddenly, the balance tilts. The illusion wavers. You realise that what felt like control was actually familiarity. And familiarity, while comforting, is not the same thing as certainty. The world here doesn't follow strict rules. It bends. It changes. It surprises you in ways that are sometimes manageable and sometimes not. You adjust again. That becomes the real skill. Not controlling everything, but learning how to move with it. How to adapt without losing yourself completely in the process. It's quieter than control. Less satisfying, maybe, but more realistic. And in a place like this, realism is often the closest thing you get to stability. So you let go of the idea that you can predict everything. You focus on what you can manage, what you can influence, and slowly the illusion fades, replaced by something steadier, not control, but resilience. Time behaves strangely in this place. At first it moves slowly. Every moment feels stretched, like it's taking longer than it should. You notice everything. The sounds, the smells, the constant movement. Each part of the day feels separate, distinct, almost heavy. Morning feels like morning. Afternoon feels like something you have to get through. Night feels endless. But then, without warning, something changes. The days begin to blur. Not because nothing is happening, but because too much is. The details start to overlap. Conversations echo each other. Faces become familiar, then fade, then are replaced by new ones that follow similar patterns. You wake up and it's already mid-morning. You blink and it's evening. You lie down and it feels like you just woke up again. Time compresses. You stop measuring it in hours. Instead, you notice it in smaller ways. The weather shifting outside, the heat of the day softening into something cooler, the sound of rain on the roof. They're rare but unmistakable. You notice changes in people. Someone who was new last week now moves through the house with quiet confidence. Someone else, once a constant presence, is suddenly gone. No announcement, no explanation, just absence. The building itself tells time. A curtain fades slightly from the sun. A floorboard creaks louder than it used to. A chair gains a new scratch that wasn't there before. These become your markers, subtle but consistent. And then there are the moments when time feels like it stops entirely. A quiet pause between sounds. A long breath at the end of the day. A moment of stillness that feels almost out of place. Those are rare, but noticeable. And in those moments, you become aware of how much has passed. Not in a dramatic way. Just a quiet realization that things are different than they were. That you're different. Not entirely, but enough. And then the moment ends. The noise returns, the movement resumes, and time continues in its strange, uneven way. Eventually the night settles. Not completely. It never fully does. But enough that the noise softens into something more distant, less demanding. You return to your room slowly. Your movements heavier now. The day has settled into your body, not as sharp exhaustion, but as something deeper, a steady, quiet tiredness that doesn't need to be announced. The door closes behind you with a soft click. For a moment you just stand there, letting the stillness settle. The room is the same as it always is, small, familiar, slightly uneven in ways you've stopped noticing during the day but see clearly now. You sit down on the edge of the bed and it creaks in recognition. What it always does. as if it knows exactly how the day has gone and has opinions about it. You remove the parts of the day one by one. Shoes first, then the small adjustments to your clothing. The mirror catches your reflection briefly, but you don't linger there. You've seen enough for today. The wash basin offers what it can. Cool water, a brief sense of refreshment that doesn't last long but's appreciated anyway. Then, finally, you lie down. The bed shifts beneath you, settling into place. The thin blanket rests lightly, more symbolic than functional. The sounds of the house are still there, faint now, distant. A voice somewhere down the hall, a soft laugh. The last movements of a night that is slowly coming to an end. Your body relaxes in stages, shoulders first, then your hands. Then the quiet release of tension you didn't realize you were holding. Your mind doesn't stop immediately. It drifts. Fragments of the day pass through. Faces without names. Conversations without beginnings or endings. Small moments that don't seem important, but linger anyway. They don't stay long. Each one fades as the next takes its place. The sounds of the house blur together. The piano's gone now. The footsteps have slowed. Even the building itself seems quieter, as if it too is finally resting. Your breathing steadies, slow, even. The room feels softer somehow, less defined. And then, gently, without effort, sleep begins to take over. Not all at once, just enough. Until the sounds fade further. The thoughts drift away. And the night for a little while becomes still. Sleep does not arrive as a clean escape. It rarely does here. Instead, it comes in layers. You drift into it slowly, like stepping into water that never quite feels the same temperature twice. The sounds of the house don't disappear completely. They soften, they stretch, they follow you. And somehow, they change. You close your eyes, and the hallway appears. The same hallway you walked earlier. The same doors, the same uneven floorboards, the same faint smell of perfume trying very hard to win an unwinnable battle. But now it's longer. Longer than it should be. You walk, or maybe you glide, because your feet don't feel entirely connected to the ground. The doors pass by slowly, each one slightly different. Some open, some don't. Some feel like they want to be opened, which is a strange feeling for a door to have. You choose one, you always choose one, and when it opens, it doesn't lead where it should. Sometimes it leads outside, a wide, quiet field. No noise, no voices, no piano that refuses to admit defeat. Just stillness. The kind that feels unfamiliar enough to make you pause. You stand there for a moment. You almost forget what you were doing. Then faintly, the sound returns. A laugh. Not loud, not close. Just enough to remind you that the quiet isn't complete. The dream shifts. Now you're back inside, but everything is softer. Edges blur. Colours fade into each other like they've decided sharpness is no longer necessary. People appear. You recognise them, but not clearly. Faces that feel familiar without becoming specific. Conversations begin, but they don't quite finish. Words float past you like they've lost their urgency. And then he said, "No, that's not how it..." Wait, listen. You try to follow, but it doesn't matter if you do. Nothing here requires understanding. There's a calm in that. A quiet permission to let things pass without holding on to them. Even the more difficult moments lose their shape. What felt sharp during the day becomes distant, softer, less demanding. Sometimes the dream takes you somewhere else entirely. A place you remember, or think you remember. A room with warmer light. A table. A window that looks out onto something that doesn't move too much. The air feels easier there. You don't question why. You just exist within it. And for a while, that's enough. The dream slows. The sounds fade further. The hallway stretches into something endless, then disappears. The field dissolves into light. and gently, almost without notice, the dream begins to let you go. There are moments when you wake before everything else, not fully awake, just present. Your eyes open slowly, like they're not entirely convinced it's necessary yet. The room is dim, caught in that quiet space between night and morning where nothing feels urgent. You don't move, there's no reason to, you just lie there, listening, and for once, it's almost quiet. Not completely, it never is. The building still breathes in its own way. A faint creak somewhere, a distant shift of weight. But compared to the usual rhythm, it feels like stillness has borrowed the space for a moment. You take a slow breath, then another. The air feels cooler at this hour, softer somehow, less crowded. This is the closest thing to solitude you get. No footsteps passing your door, no voices calling from the hallway, or no immediate expectations waiting just outside your room, tapping politely and then less politely. Just you, and the quiet. You notice small things, the way the blanket rests against your arm, the faint outline of the ceiling above you, the way the light begins to press gently against the edges of the window, not quite entering yet, just waiting. Time feels paused, not stopped, just slower. Your thoughts move differently here. They don't rush, they don't compete for attention, they drift. You think about nothing in particular, or maybe everything, but in softer shapes. Ideas without edges, memories without urgency. You don't hold on to them. You don't need to. They come, they go. The quiet allows that. For a moment you consider staying here, not moving, not starting the day just yet. Letting this small pocket of stillness stretch a little longer. But the world has its own timing. Slowly it begins to return. A sound in the hallway, faint at first, then clearer. A voice, distant but present. The building shifting as if it's remembering what it's supposed to do next. The quiet begins to fade, not abruptly, just enough, and with it this moment starts to close. You take one more breath, a quiet one, then slowly you prepare to move. The day begins again, whether you're ready or not, and you rarely are. Routine settles in quietly. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ask. It simply repeats again and again until you find yourself moving through it without needing to think. You rise, you prepare, you step into the same patterns you followed yesterday, and the day before that, and the one before that. Decor, though the details are already beginning to blur. At first it feels helpful. There's comfort in knowing what comes next, in not having to question every step. The predictability softens the edges of uncertainty. You know where to go, what to say, how to move through each part of the day without pausing too long. It becomes familiar. And familiarity is a kind of relief. But over time, it gathers weight. Not heavy enough to stop you, just enough that you notice it. In the repetition, in the way moments begin to echo each other. You greet someone and the conversation feels like one you've already had. You hear a story and you already know how it ends. Even if the details change slightly, you respond. Not automatically, but almost. Your mind learns where to focus and where to let things pass. You save your energy for the unexpected, for the moments that don't follow the pattern. Everything else becomes background, a steady rhythm that carries you forward. There's something almost soothing about it. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to decide every step. You just continue. And in a place where unpredictability is always nearby, that steadiness feels like something you can hold on to. But it also changes how time feels. Days pass more quickly when they look the same. Morning becomes afternoon before you fully noticed it. Afternoon becomes evening without asking your permission, and before you know it, you're at the end of another day, wondering where the middle went. You don't resist it. There's no energy for that. Instead, you move with it, step by step, moment by moment, letting the routine carry you even as you feel its quiet weight settle in. There are faces that stay with you, not all of them. Most pass through like everything else here. Brief, temporary, blending into the rhythm of days that don't always leave clear edges behind. But some remain. You don't always know why. It's not always the loud ones, not the ones who try hardest to be remembered. Sometimes it's the quiet ones, the ones who speak less but somehow leave more behind. You begin to recognize them before they even reach your door, the sound of their steps, the way they pause just slightly before entering, the tone of their voice steady or uncertain but familiar. There's something calming about that, knowing what to expect, even just a little. You don't have to prepare in the same way. You don't have to guess how the conversation will begin or how it might unfold. It simply continues. A pattern is but a softer one. Over time something forms, not quite a connection, but something close enough that you notice it. A shared understanding that doesn't need to be explained. A rhythm between two people who have occupied the same space more than once. They return, and when they do, it feels slightly easier. The conversations settle more quickly. The silences don't need to be filled as urgently. The moments pass with less effort. But nothing here stays the same. One day they don't come back. No warning, no explanation, just absence. At first you don't notice, then you do. And the space they occupied feels different, not empty, just changed. You adjust. You have to. New faces arrive. New patterns form. The rhythm continues. But somewhere, quietly, those familiar ones remain. Not as clear memories, just impressions. Echoes of something that once felt steady in a place that rarely is. And now. The house grows quieter, not silent. It never quite reaches silence, but softer, slower. As if even the walls are beginning to rest after holding so much of the day. The footsteps have faded. The voices have thinned into distant murmurs that no longer ask for your attention. Even the floorboards, so eager to complain earlier, seem to have settled into a kind of tired acceptance. You're still here, lying in that small familiar room. The bed beneath you has stopped shifting. The air feels cooler now, gentler, the kind of air that doesn't expect anything from you. And for the first time in a while, there's nothing left to do. No conversations to carry, no performances to hold together, no decisions waiting just outside your door, just this moment, just this stillness. You've moved through the dust, the noise, the laughter that didn't quite feel like laughter, and the long stretched hours that folded into one another. You've listened to the house breathe, you followed its rhythm, and now you don't have to follow anything at all. Your thoughts begin to loosen, not disappearing, just drifting, like those fragments of conversation you heard earlier, only softer now, further away, no longer trying to form complete sentences. Your body settles a little deeper, shoulders relaxing, hands resting without effort, breathing slow, even. The sounds that remain fade into the background, no longer something to notice, just something that exists, like distant wind or rain far away. And maybe, just for a moment, you imagine that elsewhere again, that quiet place, not clearly, not in detail, just the feeling of it, still, open, unhurried. You don't need to go there, not tonight, because right now, this is enough. This room, this quiet, this slow, steady drifting. The day is done, the house is resting, and you can finally let go of the edges of it all. No need to think, no need to hold on to anything, just let it fade, bit by bit, until the sounds disappear completely, until the thoughts grow softer, and sleep gently, quietly, takes you the rest of the way.